I'm going to confine my questions to the gambling aspect of it and your responsibilities, I suppose, around that, and particularly gambling addictions. Did you see the programme last night, the primetime programme?
I did, yes.
Yeah. Did you find it distressing in where you had the woman who was confined to her bed and completely addicted to gambling and the scratch cards that she was using?
I don't think anybody watching that programme last night couldn't have been moved by the testimony and the situation that the brave individuals who gave their stories presented.
So maybe we'll tease out some of the things that you do as a regulator to protect people like that woman that we seen last night, because we know from addiction centres and from working with people that there are very many people around the country that need to be protected. So I suppose maybe just to look at the online gambling first, and in terms of young people and gambling, how do you ensure that people who are using your online system are over the age of 18?
Okay. There are a number of controls in place and required under the licence to ensure that people under 18 are not playing national lottery games. These include a confirmation of your age at the start, but there are triggers that trigger specific identification checks. If you win a prize of €500 or more, you have to provide identification to receive it. If you withdraw €200 or more, you have to present identification to receive it. They do SWOT checks are performed as well every month on obviously by nature a random selection of online players to ask for identification, ensure that they are of age.
But you couldn't guarantee me as a parent, I have a 16-year-old son, whether he would be able to go online and gamble on the lottery, could you?
With his true age, he couldn't. He couldn't go on and gamble and give his age and date of birth and gamble. If you're asking,
but he could say, obviously, if a young person doesn't realise the dangers of gambling and all that, could get a parent's credit card and could suggest that they were another age. There's nothing there to stop them doing that. I know when you're saying when they win you ask for identification, but chances are they're going to lose, as we know.
So the requirements under the licence are that yes, that if somebody was to lie about their age and play, there isn't something currently in place to prevent that happening. What is there is to deter that happening. If the young person knew that they wouldn't be able to claim a prize, they wouldn't be able to win, they would have less incentive to do that. There is another mechanism that's there as well, is that the National Lottery is not allowed to have games or advertisements of a particular appeal to children. And this, I don't know enough about the previous licences, but this certainly is something that this licence has applied very rigorously. So, for example, you'll see in the table I provided of all of the requests to date, the game Monopoly was put forward as a proposal from the operator. It is one of the biggest selling scratch cards in the world. And then you get online versions, and that was refused by my predecessor because it would be of particular appeal to children. So we also try and make the National Lottery games that they're not attractive to somebody under 18 as well.
Yeah, I just think it's something that needs to be continuously looked at because of the increasing problem in this country with gambling. And does the National Lottery make any contributions, either voluntary or statutory, to any of the treatment facilities for gambling addiction?
They don't have any requirement under the licence to provide money to any centres. You'd have to ask them. I don't know if they voluntarily give money anywhere, but there isn't anything in the Act or the licence that requires it.
So you don't know whether they make contributions or not? They wouldn't.
But they wouldn't have to report that to me, so I wouldn't know if they voluntarily give money to any.
Morally, do you think they should?
Well, my job isn't to assess their morals. I can only hold them to account in terms of what's in the licence and the Act. I mean, they do have their own kind of corporate social responsibility programme in addition to their requirements, but unless they were doing something that was in breach of the Act or inappropriate for the National Lottery that would threaten the reputation or something like that.
That's just an opinion I was asking you.
Yeah.
You know how people can bar themselves, such as, in Britain, such as GamStop? Is there such a facility here that people can bar themselves from?
For the National Lottery, there is. For the National Lottery, there is a self-exclusion programme. This is again a requirement under the licence, and it's a new requirement that was brought in. And so people who feel they're spending too much money or too much time on can set themselves up to be self-excluded from the website. So they can do that for a few days, for a month, for 6 months. And throughout that period, then they can't get back into their account. They don't receive any marketing emails or messages throughout that period. And the operator goes a step further and also doesn't send them any marketing emails after the period has expired, unless they come back and engage.
And the period again was how many weeks?
There's a variety of periods you can choose. You can choose a few days, 1 month, or 6 months.
Okay, so it's down to the... I just want to ask you around credit cards and debit cards. Do you allow people to register online to pay with both? Credit cards and debit cards?
Yes, the licence provides that people can play with both a debit card or a credit card.
Can that be connected to a joint account for a debit card or credit card?
I'm not 100% sure of the answer to that. I'm afraid I'd have to check that and get back to you.
Yeah, maybe you could
do that.
You could see how that would cause problem. The National Lottery is regulated by yourselves as regulator. The bookmaking industry is not regulated. Do you want to see a regulator in place for that industry, or to put? I suppose what we're looking at is to put the entire gambling sector on a statutory basis, on a level footing, if you like, with that. Do you think that should be done?
I don't think it's a matter for me how the government in the Oireachtas is going to regulate the gambling sector. I have a very narrow role to just regulate. It's possibly unique. I haven't yet found another regulator that regulates only one company, but that's what I do. My job is to procure the services of a company to run the National Lottery and make sure they run it in line with the Act and the licence. How gambling is as you say, the entire wider gambling sector is regulated is really not a matter for me, and I don't think it would be appropriate for me to comment.